Today our topic is on user privacy, and our guest speaker is Yogesh Ailawadi. He is currently the Senior Vice President of Products and Innovation at AlertEnterprise Incorporated. Yogesh has 20 plus years in industry experience in both the cyber physical security and privacy. He also holds a master's degree in computer science and a professional certification in privacy from Harvard Business School. So I'm going to stop sharing and turn this over to Yogesh.
Thank you, Chit, for the introduction. Let me share my screen and then we'll get going. All right, I guess the screen is visible. Okay. Right, so today we're going to talk about user privacy, and I have been working in security and privacy space for almost 20 years now. And what I have seen that privacy has become the, I would say, mandatory component of whatever we do in the terms of whether writing a software, whether selling our services or entertaining our clients or guests. So it's part of everything now. And the first questions comes up is when we talk privacy, what privacy mean to you as an individual? And it's a very relative term. I mean, for somebody, it could be if I'm not sharing my social security number or I'm not sharing my date of birth or driver license, my information is private. But for other, the privacy could be if somebody tagged me on social media without my permission, it's this a privacy violation. So it's a very relative term, and the way we see it is the impact of privacy violation is different for in different situation, different scenarios. So the topic is very, very, I would say, is relative. Even though we will go through some of the laws came up in last few years in US and elsewhere in the world, how that law there will be still areas where these laws are not there to help you out. So we'll go through all of that in our presentation. I think when we talk privacy, there is also a word privacy violation, right? So we say if something is illegal, is a violation of a privacy. I mean, it's very, I would say, rudimentary term. We know we have some laws which we go through. But what we observed or what we have seen, the laws are not very, very mature. These are pretty new law compared to the technology where we are in today, with the era we are in today with the AI and deepfakes and all that. We should also see from the angle of what is ethical versus unethical. And at the same time, if something is looking creepy, right? It could be legal, but does it sound some bell in your mind it is right or not? I give you some example is let's say a movie star or a famous personality on a public street, they're enjoying their time, somebody take their picture and put it on the social media, right? There is no law can prevent that to happen, but is ethical, right? So there are many cases where these things gonna come into play. The law may get evolve over the period of time, but right now I would say it's the first version of the laws which we have today. And by the way, just a small disclaimer, I don't hold any degree in law. So all the discussions we're gonna be having here, it's more of my knowledge and experience from the industry. But if you are planning to implement some privacy related laws and regulation for the organization you work in, you should consult your lawyers for that. The another example of creepiness is like deep fakes these days, right? You picked up the United States president and tried to create a animated video around it and using AI technology. It's creepy, right? So what what we should always see from the privacy perspective, first is it is legal or illegal, then it is ethical. Does it sounds okay to you or not? I mean, everybody has that common understanding. It is creepy. So I would say there are many layers of privacy violation, and we'll go through those. Before we get into the current laws, but I want to go to a little bit behind in the history of privacy laws. Uh, the first, I would say, the Privacy Act came ECPA in 1986, and that was a time when the phone tapping was started by law enforcement agencies to make sure that they can nab right people. Phone tapping was too much, and then there was a law came in that they have to justify the reason why they want to tap a phone. It's 1986 I'm talking about. And then at the same time, the emails were banned. And the way the email used to work is it leaves the sender's computer, it sit on the relay server, and until the destination computer download it from the relay server. So that's how it, because there was no cloud concept that time. And the email used to sit there for 180 days. If the recipient do not download that information, it is considered public. Anybody can read that email. And so that was the era where the technology was just getting born, and this law came in 1986. Now, 30 years forward, in 2016, we have GDPR came in, which is General Data Protection Regulation in European Union. And in that 30 years, the technology has changed a lot. It evolved a lot, right? But there was nothing to protect the privacy of a user with the growing needs of users on online shopping, internet, social media. There's no law. And then obviously we have CCPA came in, California Consumer Privacy Act in 2018. Um, that had obviously added some things to it, which I gonna go in my next slide. But there is a very fundamental difference between the how the GDPR was formulated and how the CCPR formulated. One more point I want to highlight here is since we did not pay attention to the privacy topic for almost 30 years, and the technology has gone so far ahead. The law which we have today, I would say it's a first generation laws. There will be a lot of modification happening to these laws. There will be more things added to it so that privacy we should cover all these 3 points, not just illegal, but unethical or creepy, right? So those things has to be covered somewhere in those laws. This slide I put together to give you a little bit of understanding of how fundamentally GDPR and CCPA are different to each other. And once I go through this differentiation, I think you will get to know the goal of each law is little different. And let's say, for example, if you're talking about European Union's GDPR, that is applicable for any organization, whether it's a non-profit, it's for-profit, other organizations, but CCPA is only for for-profit organization. And GDPR again be applicable to any type of business model, but CCPA tell if you are only into buying and selling data business, and that was obviously 2018, there would be further modifications happening on these laws. So that's why I told that you always should consult with your the law experts to understand the current state. And then it was applicable for only companies for having $25 million revenue and above. There are some exclusions as well for that. So some of the exclusions are for CCPA, that the DMV, criminal history, all those are not part of your private record. This is public record. But then for GDPR, everything is private, including your public records, which is in the government as well. So very, very fundamental difference there. Not covered. I think in CCPA, personal data they are talking about, but GDPR, we talks about your personality, your reputation, everything. So if I try to see the fundamental difference between the two, GDPR is meant to protect your privacy. CCPA is meant to protect the consumer rights, right? So that's the fundamental difference. If you are not a consumer of an organization, which I was giving you an example of, uh, somebody taken a video of you without your permission, put it on social media, created a deep fake of you. CCPA cannot cover that because it's a consumer protection law. But in the terms of GDPR, if it is a reputation or a personality or anything get violated, you are covered with GDPR. So that's how these laws are created. And what happened when obviously these were created, it was not easy in California back in 2016, 2018, when there are big giants, social media companies who or data model was to sell their basically I would say business model is to sell data, right? So it was not an easy to pass CCPA kind of law in the first place, while in California and Silicon Valley, where you have all the companies out here. But that was a very good start, I would say. But there's a long way to go from here. And what is sensitive data as per consumers? So there is a list of data created. And for example, your racial and ethnic origin, your religious belief, your health condition, sexual orientation, sex life, citizenship status, genetic or a biometric data, all you are seeing on the left-hand side, which is even your precise geolocation or any memberships you got with the union, is all considered your sensitive information. And what consumers' rights are for that data, consumers should know what you are storing about them. So as an entity or as a business entity, you have to give a knowledge to a consumer that what you are storing about them, if you have storing this sensitive data. And consumer also has a right to access that data, correct that data, and delete that data. So you have to provide means to consumer that we have this data. Is it okay? Do you want to change it? Do you want to delete it? So that power should be with the consumer, and that's the law protects them for that. Consumers should also be able to opt out if they don't want to use that services. They should be able to opt out, and they may say, I don't want to have that data. Right to portability and transfer. I think that give me a good example of, let's say, when you are a healthcare physician at maybe healthcare provider, and few years later you switch to a different healthcare provider. Law says that there is a right of portability and transfer, but does it happen all the time? Does it not happen? So there are laws there to help consumers, but obviously the implementation of those laws are still lacking in many areas. And there's one important point got added is, if you're seeing in the last, is object to automated decision making and profiling. What does it mean is, if you are running an AI algorithm which is detecting patterns could be based on somebody's race, somebody's religion, could be based on some immigration status, and you are trying to use that data for some decision making, this is illegal. So the sensitive data which is stored by you, you should not try to create a decision making based on that data pattern and profiling. So you should not profile a user individual on any of this sensitive information. I mean, that's the realm of the sensitive data as per US CCPA law. And then again, there are many other law came in last 2 years, and this slide is courtesy. There are some organization who is tracking, like MineOS and Osana. There are about 16 or 17 states has brought up their laws, I would say, and they took CCPA as a baseline and tried to improvise on top of it. And some of them are already in place, some of them are in maybe in place this year or early next year. But every state is coming up with their own law. The only part which I feel is could be done better is if we could have a federal privacy law and then the state could follow that. But obviously that didn't happen. So every state has its own law, and they're trying to they're trying to get best use of the conditions around that state and trying to create law that. For example, in CCPA, for the California, they exempted nonprofits. But now the new laws which are coming in last 2 years, they don't exempt nonprofits. So nonprofit are also covered with the law. Obviously, biometric data collection has a different restrictions in some states that you can't even collect biometric data. Some other additional protection has been given for the children. So that's the state right now, where we are today. That what kind of laws we have, what kind of data we have to protect, and what kind of rights we have to give to the consumer, um, to save their privacy. Right. There are some facts I think it's good to know, and on an average, and this is based on certain surveys happened. On an average, any American can read, or they read over 500 privacy policies every month. That's an average. And my meaning of reading privacy policy is not mean you're literally reading it, but at least they see that policy. Whether they read it, they don't read it, it's up to them, right? So you go to a website, the website has a pop-up comes up that, oh, we are storing this data, this is your privacy information, this is how we're going to use it. How many people read it, right? And every website had that. Less than 10% people read half of the policy. And the policy has everything, how they will use their data, how will they share that data with their maybe entities, which is partnering with them with the data sharing. But obviously, the way the whole system is designed, consumer cannot pay attention to these smaller details when it comes in bulk. Every website has its own policy. And then the worst part is, everybody is opted in if someone said that they want to manually opt out. So if you're going to a website, you see a pop-up, you kill it, you don't want to even read it, you just kill it, you want to browse your website, you want to do your social media, you want to shopping, by default you are opted in. That is the design right now today is, right? I'm not a lawyer or somebody that who can tell whether it's illegal or illegal in those terms. But this is the current design. Everybody is opted in unless they manually opt out. So what does it mean is if you are not even paying attention to your privacy policy, you have not given any consent, you are the subject and your data is collected. Uh, there, there, there are certain research happen that social media companies or Google can tell more about you than your own family members about your preferences, choices, and your likes and dislikes. Because that much data they have it, and you are opted in because you never said you are opting out. So keeping this in mind that uh, this is today's world. Data is there, companies are there, they are sharing your data, right? And sometimes this is needed because, for an example, the medical research companies, they need data from hospitals to understand for what kind of problem, what kind of treatment was given, and what was the symptoms and what was the outcome. So they need some sort of data from hospitals for medical research, and that's how they invest in their pharmaceutical roadmap or their innovation roadmap for their pharmaceutical drugs. Similarly, you may have data collected at the DMV level, right? Which cars is going into accident, what was the road condition, what was the kind of a car, what kind of was a driver. And that data is used by so many third-party companies to do their own research and bring in policies. Um, a fact is, based on 1990 census data, and this was way back, as you can see, uh, if you know that there was the census list which they publish, even though it did not have users social security or first name, last name, phone number, email, but the combination of attribute of gender, date of birth, and zip code, these three combinations were enough to identify an individual person. So my point here is the data would be shared because that's the need of this, I would say, word. Unless you share the data, you're not going to grow because the data has so much value in it and people wants to use that data to innovate for the future. But at the same time, what we are sharing to do that, are we compromising on the privacy? And it is not always necessary that if you are not sharing users or any individual's name, phone number, email, or social security, it does not mean that person's privacy is still intact, right? So there are cases where you have published some sort of information, and then there is another source which I'm going to talk about that tells something else about that person. And we're gonna go a little bit deeper on that topic in the next slide. But that's how we do data anonymization and de-identification. So we have to share the data, that's a need, but we have to anonymize the data in a way that when it reaches to a third party or a research company and who is buying your data should not be able to identify an individual person. So that becomes your organizational responsibility that while you are sharing that data, it should not be able, nobody should be able to pinpoint a person, oh, this data is about this guy. The moment they are able to backtrack that data to the person, it means the privacy is violated. So that's how you do data anonymization and de-identification on the data. And it does not mean you just take out the first name, last name, and an email, phone, and you are safe. There are so many ways, there's so many data sets available to do that. Another example of that is if you try to correlate with, and it used to be the practice in US, I would say about 15, 20 years ago, that you can go to any hospital, you pay $50 and you get the whole list of what was the patient age and what treatment was given and what was the problem diagnostic, and that anybody can use that data for their own research, even though they don't share any name, email, or phone number, but at least they share all the basic details. And then if you try to correlate that data with the Census Bureau data, now you can easily find out, okay, this is the person, this was his condition in the medical history, and that's how they can pinpoint the exact person and their address. So that's the world we are in. I would go a little bit deeper on this topic in the slide and try to make you understand another concept called anonymity, right? So that anonymity concept is where you try to create or subtract the data in a way that it becomes anonymized. And I have used the word K in front of it because K is the measure of telling how many data sets a person would need to find or pinpoint a person. So if somebody is having, let's say, anonymity is K1, within the same data set, you can pinpoint an individual and their privacy is lost. If you have a 2 anonymity, it means you would at least need 2 data sets to join them and create a personal record and then try to find a person. So the higher the number of anonymity is, the better it is for the user privacy. Another example I give you, let's say you are a DMV organization and you are having you are having all the accidents data, right? Which car was involved, what is the person's age, maybe their race or whatever. And some agencies use that data for better road planning, for example. So rather than sharing, let's say the age, let's say 35 or 48, you can do range 30 to 40 years. Now you further anonymize that data. Now, if the recipient organization has some other data set, it will still be ambiguous because you created a range than giving an exact age. So you have to think through all those data when you share within your organization, within the different department, or you are sharing outside of your organization, the third party organization. You have to anonymize and you have to think through each column which you share Sometimes there are ways to add synthetic rows in the data, like which is a fake data. So you are sharing the right data, but you're also, let's say, added 100 more rows, which is totally fake. But then whoever is trying to misuse that data, they may get confused, okay, what is right and what is wrong, because they're not getting the right results. Same way, you can remove some columns which you feel is unnecessary. And this actually give me another use case to share. When we go to a restaurant or a bar, and the guy is sitting at the security guard, their person needs to know whether you are over 18 and you are who you are. Basically, you have an ID on you. And what is the process in general? They scan your driver license in the machine and everything gets copied into their software. I do not know how much they store, but they have access to everything on your driver license. And you would be amazed if you don't know how much data your driver license. If you see the backside of a driver license, the barcode, there's so much data in it. Whether you are an organ donor or not, whether you are wear glasses, whether your blood group or everything. But what that guy is supposed to know, they're supposed to know, are you over 18 and who you are. So the process has to be in a way that we don't need to share that data. I'm just giving example that there are cases still, I don't know when those processes going to be improved to keep that user privacy in mind. But when you as an organization sharing data, you have to precisely think about what makes sense to share, what does not. It's not just like you went to the database, you exported the whole file of 1,000 records and send it to a different department. I know it is the same organization in some cases, but do they really need? Another example I want to give you is when in the software, I'm a security and privacy software company. We have certain use cases where customer wants to see how their buildings are utilized. Like specifically after COVID, like how many people comes to those buildings, how many people come to floor A, floor B, and the person who wants to see that data, his his motivation is or her motivation is to understand how they have to best plan the operations in that building, right? How much staff they need in the security, how much staff they need in the cafeteria, and all that stuff. But if we try to just export that information and give it to them, it also has users' first name, last name, badge ID, and the recipient organization can find out, oh, this person came office 3 times. Why they even need to know? They just want to know the business utilization by any general public working in that organization. So there is a lot which can go wrong if you don't pay attention. So I would say this is the best slide, last two slides where you de-anonymize data, you define the anonymity in the data. And when you define the anonymity in data, you have to see that what all things you can abstract, create a range, then giving exact values, add synthetic rows, which is more dummy rows to confuse so that nobody can backtrack, or remove your columns from there. Right. So this is the slide where all the technology parts comes in. I know this might be overwhelming, but you can read about it. It is also called quasi-identifiers, where you join multiple attributes together and create a set that can identify an individual person. So even though it is not their first name, last name, or email or phone number or social security. So those are called quasi-identifier, and you have to ensure that those are not exist in your data set when you are sharing that data to any third party. Yeah. Towards the end, I know we are reaching towards the end, and we have I have a couple of case studies to discuss, and this is the real life stories which has happened in the past in US, and there is a very thin line.
Yogesh, you're okay. I didn't think your slide was moving, but it is. Okay.
Okay, yeah, I didn't change it. Yeah. So there is some case studies, and these are real life scenarios which has happened, and there is a very thin line between privacy and let's say security in this case, right? So in this program, what happened after 9/11, certain police department has started a program for profiling people based on their geolocation, where they live, based on their race, or other orientations. And the goal was to detect a bad person before the crime happens, right? So that was the goal is very good. It's a novel goal. But what we are trying to do, if somebody has not committed a crime and we are profiling, we are monitoring them, and by virtue of that, so many people who are not even a criminal get into the scrutiny, and they get like behavior from the law enforcement, which was not good. So that program lasted about 10 years, and it ended in 2012 for certain. I am not disclosing the name of PD, but that was a program. And again, as you see the line, the goal is good. You want to secure the general public, but at the same time, you want to ensure that the privacy is not impacted with that security program which you are running. This is a good case study as well. It was in the newspapers few years ago. There was a serial killer in California, and he was on the loose for many years, probably more than a decade, and then finally cops caught him because that person created his profile on the GEDmatch website, right? And that this GEDmatch website is nothing but like you have this ancestry history where you supply your DNA, and then they match a DNA and see who's your siblings or your family history. So that was the goal of that person, and he's tried to use that website, but at the same time, that DNA sample was with the police for a decade, which they are not able to identify a person. Now they finally found that person because that person opened an account on this site and submit the DNA. I know it's a good for cops because they caught that guy. It's a serial killer, but at the same time, I think this organization didn't have enough policies in place to notify public that your data may be shared with law enforcement agencies and all that. So I know it's a very thin line where you draw a line between security, privacy, and safety. But as an organization, you could have your policy specifically called out these things in the first place, whether it is for the reason of you are being safe for something happen, or maybe for the consumer's practice, because consumer also has an option of opt out. If you don't like your policy, they will opt out, right? So while we are working on these policies, while we're designing these policies, whether you are in an organization where you're putting up your privacy page on your website, you have to think through this. Okay, what would happen if there is a, let's say, uh, an open investigation leads to your organization and they will demand the data? What are you going to do in that case? Does your privacy statement covers those kind of things? So we just need to make sure we are covering everything. And at the same time, some organizations still do that practice of everybody's opt out unless you opt in, but some organizations say, no, everybody's opt in my data collection unless you opt out. So these kind of decisions every organization has to take. Law, as I said, does not cover everything. Law is very minimal, very basic. I would say it's a first generation laws. But eventually it gonna get mature, it gonna cover a lot. So with that, I'll end my presentation here. I'll thank you everyone for attending, but open for the question. I'm not sure if we have any here right now.
So thank you, Yogesh. If you have any questions, you can either just come off of mute and ask the question, or you can put it in the chat. We'll monitor the chat as well. Uh, I had one question. It sounds to me like, so if I'm a small company, but I have a internet website that I've set up, and that means it's going to be international. So in Europe, I have to follow GDPR guidelines as well, correct? I could actually be prosecuted if I weren't following those. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah, so I know from experience working with the European Union when I was with ExxonMobil, our databases had to separate personal information for customers and employees and everything. For example, you couldn't have their name with their address and this type of thing. It was a so all of these databases had to be modified adhere to the European Union's guidelines. And this was back in the 90s. Actually, it was in the late 80s and the 90s when this was going on, when there was data centers, but we were consolidating data centers. So that data all had to be adhered to for each one of the countries we were working with, or in the case of Europe, the European Union. So have you seen that type of uh, activity in your experience?
Yeah, I feel everybody is reviewing the data boundary. That is a very important topic these days. Specifically, let's say even if you are in US and somebody from European Union visit you as an organization becomes their consumer, you are sitting in US, you may have a subsidiary in EU, but then now you are holding that person's data. Let's say the person was there to visit you for your organization for some meeting, for some purpose. The person went away, but you're still holding their data and they're not aware about it. This is a violation of a privacy.
Okay.
So you have to have a processes in place. Either you notify that person that, okay, we will keep your data for 30 more days for our audit reasons, if or you will just straight away delete it, give them an option to delete it. So yeah, you have to be very careful when you are storing that data. I always say data is obviously an asset, but data is also a liability. So only store how much you need, otherwise just take it out.
Okay, thanks. Any questions? Any other questions?
Hello, my name is Ramira. I actually have a question. The slide that you had for the K anonymity, I wanted to know if you have any information about that being almost an inverse process to a term that I used to know some years ago that was basically about the K variable. And what it was that this was back in, the trend of the big data, and you remember back then. And basically what it was about was that when we were actually trying to find that needle in a haystack, right? And the more information, or just the more data, or even some metadata that you had about say one instance, that came closer and closer to identifying that particular needle kind of in that haystack, right? But it was about getting closer to that K variable because of all of this information. And now it seems like we have the inverse, where we have so much information, and you basically, concatenate all these different small bits of kind of identifiable elements to derive to that identity. But now it seems like with the K anonymity, we're trying to do the inverse to kind of obfuscate that.
Exactly.
Is that correct? Okay. So I wasn't sure. I remember that, and I was like, oh, that sounds like that, but in the reverse. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
And also I have some more details, but don't quote me on this. In US universities and colleges, I think there is some kind of standard created. The K value has to be 5 minimum. It can be 5 and more. So if somebody take a data from a research institute or a university, it should take at least 5 data set to pinpoint an individual. So it should be very, very difficult for somebody to get data from research institutes and try to make out the person.
Yes. Thank you so much.
So we have any other questions? Just go off of mute or put it in the chat.
Hi, I was just wondering, I've looked into a little bit of the privacy research in terms of just how to increase general education of, normal consumers and, laymen, right? And I was wondering if you knew of any tool that is similar to I'm kind of dating myself now, but terms of service didn't read the tosdr.org, right, where they summarize a bunch of different terms of services for people to basically digest and read. I don't know if you guys are aware of that or not. But, is there anything like this that you know of for like privacy policies?
Yeah, I guess there are certain private organizations. They specifically are catering to US market. Let's say now there are 16 states have their own way of, I would say, incorporating laws around CCPA. So there is a company called MineOS and Osana. I have seen that they have a very good documentation created state by state, that what is the meaning of law in this state versus this state for around the user privacy. So, I mean, there are some private organization also has it, but at the same time, some universities offer courses, but I do not have enough details about those.
Okay, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Anybody else?
I'm actually back again, if no one is asking anything right now. I wanted to ask, I know a portion of the description of the meeting was, quasi-identifiers and stuff, but also for de-identification. I don't know if I missed a portion of that because I had to join a little late, but did we kind of cover how do I want to say, any kind of unique I guess meanings between kind of de-identifying and some of the other terms?
No, we did not go through the specifics of the technology, but it was more of a concept level that de-identification is necessary. And it is not just about taking off somebody's first, last name, email, phone, or social security. De-identification also means what are you leaving in that data? Can that contribute towards quasi-identifiers? So.
Okay, thank you. Because I came across that in some work where basically a part of my group, it was a kind of a risk analysis component, and they weren't they wasn't really quite sure how to one, define the identification, but more importantly distinguish it from other terms within the privacy realm when it comes to like anonymity or authorship, that type of thing, or obfuscation. So I was trying to see if there was anything else you could add to that, because that is a term that a lot of folks aren't really sure where it falls in that wheelhouse, if that makes any sense.
Makes sense. Yeah. I think that we can always cover offline. My email ID is there, but if you want to chat about something, we can definitely do that.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Well, Yogesh, thank you for all this great information on privacy. And if I'll turn this back over to Mike if he's on. Yeah. There you go.
Hey, thanks everybody for attending today again. And we have these meetings every month, so we would really appreciate getting your feedback, because we're always putting the schedule, looking what's relevant. And like today's topic, and it's really every time I read the paper, I read about some identification, somebody losing their social security numbers getting shared. So we appreciate you coming out today and listening to Yogesh about the topic, but please give us your feedback and let us know what other topics would be available. We are NSF funded, so it's really important that our evaluator gets this information in as well. So thank you again for attending, and hope you all have a great weekend. I dropped that link in the chat if you haven't already seen that. I don't think I have anything else. Thanks, Yogesh, for a great presentation. We really appreciate you coming out today and doing that. And Stephen Miller for facilitating, as always. And of course, for everybody's participation here today. And if you have something, a topic actually you want to present on, or you're going to be at a conference or something, let us know. Maybe we can work you into the routine.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a great weekend.
You too.